Mr. Speaker, despite their united control of Congress, my Republican friends seem to think there's nothing they can do when Donald Trump acts in a manner that's contrary to our laws and our values. Here's what a few of them have been saying. Congressman Ryan Costello, there's nothing you can do to stop a president, let alone this president, from saying what he thinks or what he wants to say. Speaker Ryan, on immigration policy, the last thing I want to do is bring a bill out here that I know the president won't support. And lastly, again, Speaker Ryan, every morning I wake up in my office and I scroll through Twitter to see which tweets and what I will have to pretend I didn't see today later on. Congressman Lieu.
Hello, I'm Congressman Ted Lieu from Southern California. After hearing these quotes, it seems one thing is pretty clear. Our colleagues across the aisle have forgotten how Congress works.
But, Ted, did you know that there are actually concrete steps that the majority party can take to exercise its power over the administration and hold it accountable for its actions?
You know, I did know that. It's called Congressional Oversight Authority.
That's right. When the U.S. Constitution was drafted in 1787, it included checks and balances that allowed the legislative branch, us, to oversee the executive branch, the president. It's part of what makes our nation great.
But, Congressman Gallego, why haven't we seen more of these checks and balances in action?
That's a great question. Maybe our friends in the majority have forgotten how to use their power.
And that's why we're going to enter into the record Article 1 of the United States Constitution.
Great idea. So let's start with a new class that we call Welcome to Congressional Oversight 101, or as I like to call it, Congress for Dummies.
Okay, so lesson 1. Congress can actually pass legislation.
Isn't that hard?
Nope, you just need 218 votes in the House and 51 votes in the Senate.
What are some of the issues that Congress can pass legislation on, Ted?
Well, almost anything. And as Speaker Ryan has stated, he thinks we need legislation to prevent the separation of families, of kids who were ripped away from their parents by the Trump administration. We agree. Democrats have introduced the Keep Families Together Act. That has not gotten a vote, and we think we should have a vote on that bill. In addition, there's numerous pieces of legislation that can make our economy better, that can help our health care, make sure that we deal with the opioid crisis, numerous pieces of legislation such as investing in infrastructure, none of which have gotten a vote so far.
Ted, for example, could we actually be protecting the special counsel from being fired by the president?
We could do that too. There are several pieces of legislation as well that the Republican-controlled majority will not let us have a vote on.
I believe there's an actual bill that has been introduced specifically for that Ryan could actually bring to the floor to protect the special counsel, not just talk about protecting the special counsel.
Exactly, and it's called the Special Counsel Independence and Integrity Act, which has both Republicans and Democratic support in both the House and the Senate.
So why hasn't Speaker Ryan or the Republicans actually passed this bill?
You know, that's a great question, and that's why we're here today to explain to America that the majority is recessing for 5 weeks without completing its work on behalf of the American people. That is shameful.
Well, we certainly have brought this up, and we will continue to be pushing this bill till it comes to the floor. Let's move on to lesson 2.
Another thing Congress gets to do is we get to hold hearings. The Judiciary Committee, in which I sit, has not held a single hearing on any of the issues that are important to Americans. Instead, we've done 2 hearings on whether groups like Diamond and Silk get enough Facebook likes. We also held a hearing on, you ready for this? Hillary Clinton's emails.
It's important to remember that Congressional Committee chairmen get to decide what topics they hold hearings on. So are you telling me the Judiciary Chairman is more interested in Hillary Clinton's emails from 2015 or maybe 2016 than currently dealing with attacks on our democracy from Russia, from Putin, or trying to figure out how we have basically abandoned and orphaned 2,600 families at the border?
It sure seems that way.
So let's move on. What is the third thing that we could be doing as Congress to actually put the executive in check? Ted?
The other thing that the Constitution gives us the right to do is to issue subpoenas.
Subpoenas. What is a subpoena? You're a former federal prosecutor.
Right.
Please enlighten us, since somehow this Congress has forgotten that we could do subpoenas.
Right. It's very simple. It is a document that will require a witness to show up before a congressional hearing or to produce documents to congressional investigators.
So there's this, I don't know if you know this, but there's this neat little House rule called House Rule 11, Clause 2. Have you heard of this?
It sounds a little complicated. Can you explain how it works?
It's not. It's very simple. This clause allows House committees to issue subpoenas, which are legal documents that force somebody to do something, in this case, either testify or give Congress documents.
So what that means is Congress could actually subpoena the translator that was in that private 2-hour meeting between the president and Vladimir Putin, of which Americans have no idea what was discussed. And let me give an example of why that is bad for our country. Recently, the Russians attacked a U.S. general. Congressman Gallego and I both served on active duty in the military, and they were criticizing this U.S. general for allegedly not doing something that was discussed in that private 2-hour meeting. It's certainly possible the U.S. general was wrong. It's also possible the Russians were making stuff up. We have no idea, and Congress needs to exercise its proper oversight authority so we understand what is happening between the United States and the Kremlin.
Or we could do something really crazy and subpoena all the many administration officials, department heads that have gotten rich and richer by exploiting their public offices for private gain.
So why don't we, I agree with you, why don't we now move on to our last lesson?
Lesson number 4, requesting investigations.
Okay, so just to recap, Congress can pass legislation, we can hold hearings, we can issue subpoenas, and now we can request investigations.
Every committee has jurisdiction over a set of agencies. Those agencies each have something called an inspector general. These officials are responsible for investigating waste, fraud, and abuse at each agency and reporting back to Congress.
So what can Congress do with these inspectors general?
Well, Ted, Congress can actually request an inspector general report.
So for example, we could request an inspector general to look into Wilbur Ross's alleged insider trading. We can request an inspector general report to look at all their waste, fraud, and abuse of various cabinet officials in Trump's cabinet of corruption, where they're spending large amounts of taxpayers' money on luxury private travel. We could do that, right?
Exactly.
But again, let me just remind people that my committee that I sit on, the House Judiciary Committee, actually did exercise that power, and they used that power to look into, again, ready for this, Hillary Clinton's emails. Last time I checked, Hillary Clinton is not president, nor is she running for president. It's another example of their Republicans in this House who are focused on the past. Democrats are focused on the future. We want to reduce healthcare costs, address the opioid epidemic, invest in infrastructure to increase wages, and get corruption out of government.
So what have we learned today? Unfortunately, we've learned that our Republican colleagues are unwilling or afraid, either or, to use their power vested in them by the Constitution on behalf of the American people to keep the executive in check.
And it's really simple. At the end of the day, Congress should not be going on recess before we do the important work on behalf of the American people.
It's shameful that we're going on recess right now while we know that there's foreign adversaries targeting our elections, targeting our elected officials. We have a president that we cannot get straight answers out of, and they refuse, this Congress, the Republican-led Congress, refuse to act. So maybe it's time to turn control of this chamber to members who are willing to hold